The battlefield stretched for miles under a burning orange sky. And Sergeant Marcus Cole knew he was going to die here on this alien world called Vulturis, IVHE, could feel the blood leaving his body through the hole in his chest. And he could see the dark shapes of enemy ships, passing overhead like metal vultures waiting for the fighting to end. All around him lay the bodies of his squad. The men and women he had trained with and fought beside for 3 long years of this terrible war. Private Jenkins was gone. And so was Corporal Tanaka. And the young medic everyone called Lucky had taken a plasma bolt to the head before she could even reach for her medical kit. Marcus tried to move his arm, but the pain was too much. And he let out a groan that sounded weak and pathetic even to his own ears. Year was 2347 by Earth's calendar. And humanity was losing the greatest war it had ever fought. The Dominion Collective had come from the stars, with ships that blocked out the sun and weapons that could crack a planet in half. And they had decided that humans were too dangerous to let live. 12 alien species had joined together under one banner. And they had spent the last 5 years burning human colonies and pushing the survivors back toward Earth. Marcus had joined the 77th Terran Shock Division when he was just 19 years old. A farm boy from a small colony that no longer existed because the Dominion had turned it into ash. He had watched his mother die in the first attack, and he had carried his baby sister through burning streets until a rescue ship had taken them away. Now his sister was safe on Earth, and Marcus was dying on a battlefield millions of miles from home. And he wondered if anyone would ever tell her what happened to him. The sky was getting darker, or maybe that was just his vision fading. And Marcus found himself thinking about small things like the taste of his mother's cooking and the sound of rain on a metal roof. He had always thought death would be dramatic and loud. But it turned out that dying was quiet and slow and almost peaceful in a strange way. Then he heard something moving nearby, and his soldier instincts forced his eyes open. Even though every part of him wanted to just slip away into the darkness, a figure was crawling toward him through the mud and blood. And at first Marcus thought it was one of his squad members who had somehow survived. But then the figure came closer, and Marcus felt his heart pound with fear despite his wounds. It was a Velnorath, one of the creatures that humans called blood wraiths. And it was the most terrifying thing Marcus had ever seen. The Velnorath were ancient beings that the Dominion kept in chains and used as weapons against their enemies. And they were the stuff of nightmares throughout the galaxy. They fed on the life force of other creatures, draining them dry and leaving nothing but empty husks. And even the other Dominion species were afraid of them. This one was tall and thin, with skin as pale as moonlight and eyes that glowed with a faint silver light. And it was clearly wounded just as badly as Marcus was. Silver blood leaked from wounds across its body, and its movements were weak and desperate as it dragged itself through the mud. Marcus tried to reach for his sidearm, but his arm would not obey him, and he could only watch as the creature came closer and closer. Then the Velnorath spoke, and its voice was like wind through dead leaves, dry and ancient and somehow sad. "Human," it said in broken galactic common, the trade language that all species used, "you are dying, and so am I." Marcus wanted to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. An enemy monster trying to make conversation with him while they both bled out on a forgotten battlefield. "What do you want?" he managed to whisper. And each word felt like it cost him something precious. The Velnorath's silver eyes studied him with an expression that Marcus could not read. And then it spoke again. "I am called Ethros, and I have lived for 9,000 of your years. And I do not wish to die here in the mud like an animal." "Join the club," Marcus said. And a weak laugh escaped his lips that turned into a cough that brought more blood up his throat. "There is a way," Ethros said. And he lifted one pale hand that dripped with silver blood. "Alkheim can share our essence with others, and it can heal wounds that would kill any creature." Marcus stared at the alien blood that seemed to glow with its own inner light. and he felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Your blood kills everyone who drinks it," he said, because every human soldier knew the stories about the Vulnereth and their deadly essence. "Yes," Ethros admitted, and there was something like hope in his ancient eyes. "It has killed every species that has ever tried. But your kind is different." "Different how?" Marcus asked, though he was not sure why he was even having this conversation with a monster. "Humans are strange," Ethros said. "Your bodies adapt and change, and survive things that would destroy other races. And I have watched your kind do impossible things throughout this war." Marcus thought about everything humanity had survived. The plagues and the wars and the disasters that should have wiped them out 100 times over. He thought about his mother who had shielded him with her own body when the bombs fell. And he thought about his sister who was counting on him to come home. "What happens if it works?" he asked. "You will live," Ethros said. "And you will become something new, something that has never existed before in all the long history of the galaxy. And if it does not work, then you will die here anyway, just a few minutes sooner than you would have." Marcus looked up at the burning sky and made his decision in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Had nothing left to lose. And maybe that was the most human thing of all. The refusal to give up, even when giving up, was the only sensible option. "Give it to me," he said. Ethros pressed his wounded hand to Marcus's lips, and the silver blood flowed into his mouth like liquid fire. The taste was like nothing Marcus had ever experienced. Sweet and bitter and electric all at once, and he felt it spreading through his body like a living thing. Then the pain began, and Marcus screamed as every cell in his body started to burn and change and become something else. Entirely his heart stopped beating, and for one terrible moment there was nothing but darkness and silence, and then something new began to beat in his chest. Something stronger and stranger than any human heart had ever been. The last thing Marcus heard before consciousness left him was the voice of Ethros whispering in a language older than the stars. "Rise, unbroken vessel, and show the universe what humanity can become." 3 days passed on the battlefield of Valtherus IV, and the Dominion salvage teams finally arrived to collect the dead and strip the wreckage for useful technology. The war had moved on to other worlds, and this place was nothing now but a graveyard filled with broken machines and rotting bodies. A team of Croxian salvagers moved through the mud with their scanning equipment, their forearms working quickly to tag valuable items for collection. The Croxians were large insect-like creatures with hard shells and compound eyes, and they served the Dominion as workers and scavengers because they were too weak to be soldiers. One of them stopped suddenly and made a clicking sound of confusion, and the others gathered around to see what had caused the reaction. The scanner was showing something impossible, a life sign in the middle of a field of corpses, and the reading made no sense at all. It was not human, and it was not Vulnereth, and it was not any species in the Dominion database. And the scanner kept flashing error messages as it tried to identify what it was detecting. "Call the soldiers," the lead Croxian said, and there was fear in his clicking voice. 20 minutes later, a squad of Dominion warriors surrounded a deep crater in the center of the battlefield. Their weapons pointed at the figure standing at the bottom. Marcus Cole stood in the mud where he had fallen 3 days ago, and he was staring at his own hands like he had never seen them before. His skin was pale now, almost white like fresh snow, and his eyes glowed with a soft silver light that seemed to pulse with each breath he took. The wound in his chest was gone, and in its place was smooth skin, without even a scar to show where the plasma round had torn through him. He felt strong, stronger than he had ever felt in his entire life. And he could hear sounds that should have been too quiet for human ears. He could hear the heartbeats of the soldiers above him, fast and frightened, and he could smell their fear like a sharp scent in the air. "Do not move." "Human!" shouted a Dominion officer, a tall reptilian creature called a Visani. "You are now a prisoner of the collective. Marcus looked up at the soldiers surrounding him, and he counted 23 of them with heavy weapons and combat armor. 3 days ago, he would have been terrified, but now he felt something different. Something that might have been amusement. "I do not think I want to be a prisoner," he said, and his voice sounded different now, deeper and smoother than it had been before. The Visani officer hissed with anger and raised his plasma rifle. But before he could fire, Marcus moved. He did not run or jump. He simply appeared at the top of the crater, like he had always been there. And the soldiers stumbled backward in shock. Marcus grabbed the officer by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. And he was amazed at how light the alien felt. "How are you doing this?" the officer gasped, his clawed hand scratching uselessly at Marcus's grip. "I have no idea," Marcus admitted. And then he threw the officer into a group of soldiers with enough force to knock them all down. The other soldiers opened fire, and plasma bolts struck Marcus in the chest and arms and face. He felt the heat and the impact, and he watched in fascination as the wounds closed almost instantly, the flesh knitting back together like it was being sewn by invisible hands. The soldiers stopped firing and stared at him with pure terror in their eyes. And Marcus understood that he had become something they had never seen before. He moved through them like a ghost, his new body reacting faster than his mind could follow. And in less than a minute, all 23 soldiers were on the ground. Some were dead, and some were merely unconscious. And Marcus was surprised to find that he did not feel bad about any of it. These creatures had tried to exterminate his species, and he had simply defended himself. A weak voice called out from the crater behind him, and Marcus turned to see Aethros struggling to climb up the muddy slope. The ancient Velnerith looked even weaker than before, his silver blood still leaking from wounds that had not healed. "You survived," Aethros said, and there was wonder in his voice. "You actually survived the transformation." Marcus walked back to the crater and helped Aethros climb out, and he was struck by how fragile the alien felt in his arms. "What am I now?" Marcus asked. "What did your blood do to me?" Aethros looked at him with those ancient silver eyes and shook his head slowly. "You are something new," he said. "Something that has never existed in all my 9,000 years of life." "That does not answer my question." "Because I do not have an answer," Aethros said. "The transformation should have killed you. It has killed every other species that ever attempted it. But somehow you changed instead of dying." Marcus thought about the soldiers he had just defeated, and he remembered how their weapons had hurt him but could not stop him. "I am stronger than before," he said. "Faster and harder to kill." "You are more than that," Aethros said. "You have our immortality without our weaknesses. You do not burn in sunlight, and you do not go mad with hunger the way we do. How is that possible?" "Human biology," Aethros said, and there was something like respect in his voice now. "Your species adapts and changes in ways that no other race can match. You survive things that should destroy you." Marcus looked down at his pale hands and felt the new power flowing through his veins like liquid lightning. "There is something else you should know," Aethros said. "Among my people there is an ancient prophecy, a story passed down for 100,000 years. I do not care about prophecies," Marcus said. But Aethros continued anyway. "The prophecy speaks of the unbroken vessel, a being from a young and impossible species who would drink our blood and become something greater than either race alone. And you think that is me? I think that you are the first being in galactic history to survive what you just survived," Aethros said. "And I think the Dominion will hunt you to the ends of the universe when they learn what you have become." Marcus looked at the fallen soldiers and then at the sky where enemy ships still passed overhead. He thought about his sister waiting for him on Earth, and he thought about all the humans who were still fighting and dying in this terrible war. "Let them come," he said, and his silver eyes burned with a cold fire. "Let them send their armies and their weapons and their monsters. What will you do?" Ethros asked. Marcus smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just discovered that he was no longer prey. "I'm going to make them regret ever coming to human space," he said. "I am going to show them what happens when you push humanity too far." Ethros nodded slowly and leaned on Marcus for support as they began walking away from the battlefield. "Then I will help you," the ancient Velnerith said. "I will teach you to control your new abilities and to master the hunger that comes with them." "Why would you help me?" Marcus asked. "Your people serve the Dominion. My people are slaves," Ethros said. And there was ancient pain in his voice. "We have been prisoners for 10,000 years, tortured and twisted into weapons against our will. Then maybe," Marcus said, "when I am done with the Dominion, your people will be free too." They walked into the night together, and the universe would never be the same again. 6 months had passed since Marcus Cole died on the battlefield and was reborn as something new. And in that time, he had become a legend. The Dominion soldiers whispered about him in their barracks and refused to patrol alone at night. And they had given him a name that spread through the occupied territories like wildfire. They called him the Silver Spectre, a ghost that appeared from nowhere and left only death behind. Marcus struck without warning and without mercy, attacking supply convoys and military outposts in prison camps across a dozen conquered worlds. He freed human prisoners wherever he found them and destroyed anything that could be used against his people. And he vanished into the darkness before reinforcements could arrive. The Dominion sent their best hunters after him, elite soldiers trained to track and kill the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. None of them came back alive. They sent assassins and special forces, and even a team of combat robots programmed with every known fighting style. Marcus destroyed them all. Each night he grew stronger, because Ethros had taught him the secret of the Velnerith hunger. The blood race needed to feed on life force to survive, draining the energy from living creatures to fuel their immortal bodies. Marcus refused to feed on humans, so instead he fed on the Dominion soldiers he killed, drinking their life essence as they died. With each feeding, he became faster and stronger and harder to kill, and his senses grew sharper until he could hear a whisper from a mile away. He could see in perfect darkness and move through shadows like they were doorways. And his body healed from wounds that would have killed a normal man 100 times over. But the greatest change was in his mind, because Marcus was starting to understand what he had truly become. He was not just a weapon or a monster. He was a bridge between two species, and he carried the strengths of both without the weaknesses of either. Ethros stayed by his side through all of it, teaching him to control his new abilities and sharing the wisdom of 9,000 years. The ancient Velnerith told Marcus about his people and their history, about how they had once been peaceful scholars who studied the mysteries of life and death. Then the Dominion had come with their armies and their chains, and they had twisted the Velnerith into weapons through 10,000 years of torture and conditioning. "We were not always monsters," Ethros said one night as they rested in a hidden cave. "We were made into monsters because monsters were useful to the Dominion." "Then you are slaves," Marcus said, "not enemies." "The Dominion does not see the difference," Ethros replied. "To them we are tools to be used and discarded when we break." Marcus thought about that for a long time, and he began to understand that this war was bigger than just humans against aliens. It was about freedom against tyranny, and there were victims on both sides of the battle lines. But Marcus could not save everyone, at least not yet. So he focused on saving the people he could reach. Word of his exploits spread through the human resistance networks, and soon people were telling stories about the Silver Spectre like he was some kind of supernatural. Some said he was a demon summoned by human scientists, and others claimed he was an angel sent by God to punish the invaders. The truth was stranger than any of the stories. But Marcus did not care what people believed as long as they kept fighting. and came the night that changed everything. The night Marcus attacked the prison moon of Kethvoron. Kethvoron was the largest Dominion prison in the sector, a fortress that held 40,000 human captives in conditions that could only be called tortured. Prisoners were forced to work in mines and factories until they died, and new captives arrived every week to replace the ones who had been worked to death. Marcus had been watching the moon for 3 weeks, learning its patrol patterns and security systems and weak points. He had never attempted anything this big before, and Ethers warned him that even his new powers might not be enough. "This is not like attacking a supply convoy," Ethers said. "There are 5,000 soldiers on that moon and defense systems that could destroy a battleship. 40,000 humans are suffering in there," Marcus replied. "I will not leave them to die." "Then at least wait for the human resistance to send support." "There is no time," Marcus said. "I intercepted a Dominion transmission that said they are planning to execute the prisoners next week to make room for new captives." Ethros was silent for a moment, and then he nodded slowly. "Then I will come with you," he said, "and we will do the impossible together." They struck at midnight when the prison was at its quietest, and Marcus moved through the facility like death itself. He disabled the communication systems first, so no one could call for help. And then he began working his way through the guard posts one by one. Ethros could not fight like Marcus could, but he used his Velnorath abilities to create distractions and disable security systems. Guards did not understand what was happening until it was too late. And by the time the alarms finally sounded, half the garrison was already dead. Marcus found the control room and forced the surviving officers to open all the prison cells. And then he made his way to the landing pads where the transport ships were waiting. The human prisoners poured out of their cells like a flood, weak and starving, but alive. And many of them fell to their knees when they saw Marcus with his glowing silver eyes. "The ships are waiting," Marcus told them. "Get to the landing pads and fly to the coordinates I have programmed. The human resistance will meet you there." "What are you?" one of the prisoners asked. An old woman with scars on her face and chains still hanging from her wrists. "I am Sergeant Marcus Cole of the 77th Terran Shock Division," he said, "and I'm here to take you home." The old woman started to cry, and she was not the only one. Marcus stayed behind to hold off the remaining guards while the prisoners escaped. And by morning, 40,000 humans were on their way to freedom. The news spread across the galaxy within days. And suddenly the Silver Spectre was not just a rumor anymore. He was a symbol, proof that humanity was not defeated. Proof that one person could make a difference against impossible odds. Admiral Yuki Tanaka, the highest-ranking officer left in the Terran Navy, sent a secret message to Marcus through the Resistance Network. "We need to meet," she wrote. "Humanity needs more than a ghost. We need a leader who can show us how to win this war." Marcus read the message and looked at Ethros, and he knew that his small personal war was about to become something much bigger. "It seems I have a meeting to attend," he said. "And what will you tell them?" Ethros asked. Marcus thought about the 40,000 people he had just saved, and he thought about the billions more who were still counting on humanity to survive. "I will tell them that the time for hiding is over," he said. "It is time to take the fight to the Dominion and end this war once and for all." The plan was insane, and everyone in the war room knew it. But Admiral Yuki Tanaka had stopped believing in safe plans a long time ago. She stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, her gray hair pulled back tight and her eyes hard as steel. And she listened as Marcus Cole explained what he wanted to do. "You want to attack the Dominion throne world," she said, "with what remains of our fleet." "Not the throne world itself," Marcus replied. "Just the Velnorath containment facilities. The place where they keep the blood wraiths in chains. That is still suicide. Those facilities are the most heavily defended locations in Dominion space, which is exactly why they will not expect us to attack them." Ethros stepped forward, his pale form drawing nervous looks from the human officers in the room. "The facilities hold 10,000 of my people," he said. "If we free them, the Dominion will face an enemy they cannot control. You want to unleash the blood wraiths on the galaxy," Tanaka said. And there was horror in her voice. "I want to give them a choice," Marcus said. "For the first time in 10,000 years, they will be able to choose whether to fight or flee. And I believe they will choose to fight against their former masters." The debate went on for hours. But in the end, the humans had no better options. Their fleet was broken, and their armies were scattered. And the Dominion was preparing a final assault on Earth that would end humanity forever. They needed a miracle. And Marcus Cole was the closest thing to a miracle they had. 3 weeks later, the last human battle fleet emerged from hyperspace above the Dominion. Throne world of Axer Prime, there were only 30 ships left. Barely enough to challenge a single Dominion battle group. But they were not here for a normal fight. Marcus stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the enemy fleet scramble to intercept them. And he felt the hunger burning in his chest. "Launch all fighters," Admiral Tanaka commanded. "Draw their attention away from the landing craft." The human pilots flew into battle, knowing that most of them would not return. But they did not hesitate. They were buying time for Marcus to reach the surface. And they were willing to pay any price. Marcus took a small shuttle down through the chaos of the battle, dodging plasma fire and missile explosions as he descended toward the largest containment facility on the planet. Ethros was beside him, weaker now than he had ever been, his ancient body finally starting to fail after 9,000 years. "You do not have to come with me," Marcus said. "You have already done enough. I want to see my people freed," Ethros replied. "I want to see the look on the Dominion's faces when they realize what they have unleashed." The shuttle crashed through the roof of the containment facility, and Marcus leaped out before it had even stopped moving. 100 Dominion guards were waiting for him, their weapons already firing. And Marcus walked through the storm of plasma like it was nothing more than rain. He grabbed soldiers and threw them through walls. He tore through armor with his bare hands, and he moved so fast that the security cameras could barely track him. The guards called for reinforcements. And soon Marcus was facing an entire army. A Dominion general appeared on the facility's communication screens, his reptilian face twisted with fury. "What are you?" he demanded. "What kind of monster has humanity created?" Marcus stopped in the middle of the carnage and looked up at the screen, his silver eyes burning with cold fire. "I am what happens when you push humanity too far," he said. "I am the thing your species creates when you leave us no other choice. I am the monster you made, and I am your end." He continued his march toward the central vault. Leaving destruction in his wake, the Dominion threw everything they had at him: plasma cannons and gravity weapons and sonic disruptors. But nothing could stop his advance. Marcus felt each wound heal almost as quickly as it was made. And he drew strength from the life force of every soldier who fell before him. Finally, he reached the vault doors. Massive slabs of metal 10 feet thick, designed to contain the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Marcus placed his hands against the doors and pushed, and the metal groaned and bent and finally shattered under his strength inside. 10,000 Velnorith hung in suspension fields, their bodies pale and still, their eyes closed in dreamless sleep. Marcus found the control panel and prepared to shut down the containment systems. But a voice stopped him. "Wait," Ethros said. And Marcus turned to see his friend collapsed against the wall, silver blood pooling beneath him. "You are dying," Marcus said. And he rushed to the ancient Velnorith's side. "I have been dying for a long time," Ethros said. "But I held on because I wanted to see this moment." "You will see it," Marcus said. "I will free them, and then I will get you to a healer." "No," Ethros said. And he grabbed Marcus's hand with surprising strength. "My time is over, but yours is just beginning." Silver light began to flow from Ethros' body into Marcus. The last of the ancient Velnorithid's vow passing to his human friend. "Take my strength," Ethros said. "Take everything I have and use it to finish what we started." "I cannot lose you," Marcus said. And he was surprised to feel tears on his cheeks. "You are the only one who understands what I am. You were always the prophecy." "Marcus Cole," Ethros whispered, "not because of what you became, but because of what you already were, human, stubborn, unbreakable." The silver light faded, and Ethros was gone. His 9,000 years finally at an end, Marcus knelt beside his friend for a long moment. And then he stood up and walked to the control panel. He shut down every containment field in the facility at once. And 10,000 Velnorith opened their eyes for the first time in decades. They saw Marcus standing before them with silver eyes and silver tears on his face. And they knew immediately what he was. "The unbroken vessel," one of them whispered. And the word spread through the vault like wildfire. "The Dominion has held you prisoner for 10,000 years, Marcus said. "But today you are free. Today you have a choice." He pointed toward the doors, where the sounds of battle could still be heard. "You can run and hide and spend eternity looking over your shoulders. Or you can follow me and show your former masters what it feels like to be afraid." The Velnorith did not hesitate. They poured out of the vault like a silver tide. And the Dominion soldiers who had been waiting outside screamed as the creatures they had tortured for millennia finally had their revenge. Marcus led the charge through the facility and out into the streets of the throne world. And everywhere they went, the Dominion forces fell before them by morning. The most powerful empire in the galaxy had lost its capital, and the universe would never be the same. 1 year had passed since the fall of Axer Prime, and the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The Dominion Collective, that had once ruled 1,000 star systems, was now nothing more than a memory, shattered into pieces that could never be put back together. 7 of the 12 member species had surrendered to the newly formed Galactic Concordat, a fragile alliance built on the ashes of the old empire. The remaining 5 species had descended into civil war, fighting among themselves for scraps of territory. While the rest of the galaxy moved on without them, Earth was free again. And human. Colonies across the stars were beginning to rebuild. Marcus Cole stood before the great assembly hall of the Concordat, looking out at representatives from dozens of species who had come to witness this historic moment. Humans sat beside former enemies, and Velnorith delegates occupied seats of honor for the first time in 10,000 years. The Silver Spectre had become more than a legend now. He had become a symbol of everything that had changed. Some species worshipped him as a god, building temples in his honor and telling stories of his impossible deeds. Others feared him as a monster, a warning of what could happen when you pushed. A weaker species, too far, Marcus did not care about worship or fear. He only cared about keeping his promise to the people who had died so that humanity could survive. Admiral Tanaka stood at the podium, her voice strong and clear as she addressed the assembly. 1 year ago, we faced extinction, she said. The Dominion had decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist, and they nearly succeeded in wiping us out. She paused and looked at Marcus, and there was respect in her eyes that went beyond words. But we survived, because one human soldier refused to accept defeat, because he drank alien blood on a forgotten battlefield and became something the universe had never seen. The assembly erupted in applause, and Marcus felt uncomfortable under all the attention. He had never wanted to be a hero. He had only wanted to save his people and keep his promise to his dying friend. When the noise finally died down, the Velnorith High Elder rose to speak. She was ancient, even by Velnorith standards, one of the few who remembered life before the Dominion enslaved her people. For 10,000 years, my species lived in chains, she said. We were tortured and twisted and used as weapons against innocent beings across the galaxy. Her silver eyes turned to Marcus, and there was something like love in her gaze. Then the unbroken vessel came to us, a being from the youngest species in the galaxy, and he gave us something we had forgotten was possible. He gave us hope. The assembly fell silent as the elder walked toward Marcus and knelt before him. On behalf of all Velnerith, I offer you leadership of our people, she said. Become our king, and guide us into this new age. Marcus looked at the kneeling elder and at all the Velnerith delegates who had risen to their feet. He thought about Aetherus and the sacrifice his friend had made, and he knew that the ancient Velnerith would have wanted him to accept. But Marcus also knew that leadership was not his destiny. I am honored by your offer, he said, but I cannot accept. A murmur of surprise ran through the assembly, and the elder looked up at him with confusion. Your people do not need a king. Marcus continued. You need to find your own way forward, to discover who you are without chains and without masters. I will always be your friend and your ally, but I will not be your ruler. The elder studied his face for a long moment, and then she smiled. Aetherus chose well when he gave you his blood, she said. You have the wisdom to match your strength. She returned to her seat, and Admiral Tanaka stepped forward again. Sergeant Cole, the Terran government would like to offer you the position of Supreme Commander of all human military forces. Marcus almost laughed at the thought of a farm boy from a destroyed colony commanding the armies of Earth. I am grateful for the offer, Admiral, but I must decline that one as well. Then what do you want? Tanaka asked. Name anything in our power to give, and it is yours. Marcus thought about his sister who was waiting for him on Earth, safe and healthy, thanks to everything he had done. He thought about Aetherus, who had given his life so that Marcus could complete his mission, and he thought about the darkness between the stars, where enemies both known and unknown might be waiting. I want a ship, he said. A small one, nothing fancy, just fast enough to get me where I need to go. A ship, Tanaka repeated. That is all? I want to patrol the borders of human space. Marcus said, I want to watch and wait and make sure that no one ever threatens my people again. You would give up fame and power and comfort to be a simple patrol guard. I was a soldier before I became whatever I am now, Marcus said, and a soldier is what I will remain. The assembly did not understand, but they agreed to his request because they could not refuse him anything. 3 days later, Marcus flew away from Earth in a small ship with no name, headed toward the edge of human territory. He sat alone in the cockpit, watching the stars drift past his window, and he thought about everything that had happened since that day on Valthrus IV. He was no longer human. Not really, but he had never felt more connected to his species than he did now. Humans were stubborn and foolish and brave beyond all reason. They refused to surrender, even when surrender was the only logical choice. They looked into the darkness and said, not today, and meant it with every fiber of their being. That was the secret the galaxy had never understood, the thing that made humanity dangerous. It was not their technology or their weapons or their numbers. It was their refusal to accept defeat. An old Velnerith elder had once tried to explain this to the Galactic Council, speaking words that would be remembered for centuries. You ask why the humans survived what killed all others, she said. You ask why he became more than us, stronger than us. I will tell you. It is because humans do not know how to die. They do not accept endings. They rage against the darkness until the darkness itself learns to fear them. That is what makes them dangerous. That is what makes them magnificent. They are the species that looks into the void and says not today. Marcus smiled as he remembered those words, and he set his course for the distant stars. He was humanity's guardian now, their protector, their monster in the darkness, and he would be watching forever. The universe had tried to destroy his species and had created something far worse. It had created a human with the power of gods and the will to use it, and had created Marcus Cole, and He would never let them forget what humanity could become when they had nothing left to lose.